The Galactic Empire had been conquering planets for centuries. They were strong, powerful, and feared across the galaxy. The Empire had crushed countless civilizations, leaving no one to challenge their authority. They believed they were unbeatable. Their fleet was the largest and most advanced in the galaxy, filled with enormous warships, powerful weapons, and skilled soldiers. Every time they set their sights on a new planet, they knew it would be an easy victory. No one had ever been able to stand up to them. But then, they looked at Earth. The Empire knew little about this small blue planet in a distant corner of the galaxy. They had scanned it from afar and seen that it was full of life, but they thought the humans were just like any other species, weak and easily controlled. They had no idea what they were about to face. The decision was made. Earth would be the Empire's next target. The Emperor ordered his fleet to begin preparations for the invasion. No one in the Empire had ever even heard of Earth's military or its people. It seemed like just another simple conquest. Earth would be no different from the many other worlds the Empire had taken over. The humans would bow before the Empire, just like everyone else. The Emperor was confident. He had no doubt that his fleet would crush the humans in a matter of hours. The Empire's leaders laughed at the idea of fighting a species that was so far behind them technologically. They couldn't imagine how anyone could survive against their overwhelming strength. As the Empire's fleet began its journey toward Earth, the humans on the planet had no idea what was coming. The Empire had chosen to invade quietly, without warning. The humans were completely unaware that their world was about to be torn apart. But there was something strange. The moment the fleet entered Earth's solar system, a message was sent out. It wasn't a message from the humans' governments or military leaders, but from someone, or something, that seemed to speak directly to the Empire's commanders. The message was simple, short, direct. Run. The Empire's leaders were puzzled. They couldn't understand why the humans would send such a message. It made no sense. Why would a species, so clearly outmatched, warn them like that? The message wasn't threatening or full of anger. It wasn't a call for help. It was just one word. Run. The commanders on the Empire's ships laughed. "This is ridiculous," one of them said. "Do they really think a single message will stop us? We are the Empire. Nothing can stop us." The fleet moved closer to Earth, but the message kept repeating. It wasn't just a random broadcast. It was being sent from every corner of the planet, in every language the humans spoke. Run. It echoed in the emptiness of space, reaching every ship in the Empire's fleet. The Empire's commanders began to feel a little uneasy, but they quickly dismissed the warning. "It's just a trick," one said. "A desperate attempt by the humans to scare us. They're afraid." The fleet continued toward Earth, undeterred. The Empire's ships were massive, their weapons far more powerful than anything Earth had. The humans wouldn't even know what hit them. They would fight for a little while, but the Empire knew it was only a matter of time before they gave up and surrendered. But the message was there, still repeating, still hanging in the air. Run. As the Empire's fleet entered Earth's atmosphere, the humans on the ground were already ready. They had seen the signs, felt the tension. Earth's leaders had been aware of the Empire for some time, though they had never encountered them. But the warning from their mysterious source had been clear. The humans weren't afraid. They knew something the Empire didn't. The Empire's commanders thought it was just a game. They thought Earth would fall like all the others. But they had made a terrible mistake. The humans were not what they seemed. The first ships began to drop from the Empire's fleet, and their soldiers prepared to land on Earth's surface. They were ready for easy victory. But as they looked down at the planet, something began to feel different. The humans weren't fleeing. They weren't running. Instead, they were preparing. The Galactic Empire, the most powerful force in the galaxy, had never met a species like humans. They didn't understand the one thing that made them so dangerous. They had underestimated Earth, and soon they would find out how wrong they were. The humans weren't going to run. but they would make the Empire wish they had. The Galactic Empire was used to winning. It had been thousands of years since they had met any serious resistance. No one had ever dared challenge their power, and they had grown arrogant. Their ships were the biggest and most advanced. Their weapons could destroy planets, and their soldiers were fierce. The Empire was the law of the galaxy. No one stood a chance against them. But now, as the fleet approached Earth, something strange happened. A single, short message kept repeating across the Empire's ships. Run. It was strange, confusing, and in the eyes of the Empire, meaningless. Why would a weak, helpless species send a message like that? The Empire's commanders laughed at the message. They thought it was a joke. Surely, no one could be serious about challenging the might of the Galactic Empire. It's just a scare tactic, one of the commanders said. The humans are trying to make us afraid. They think their message will stop us. How foolish. The officers around him agreed. They believed that Earth was just like every other planet they had conquered. The humans were primitive. They had no advanced technology, no real weapons, and no way of stopping the Empire's ships. The idea that the humans were capable of anything more than running away was laughable. The fleet continued its course, moving closer to Earth with no hesitation. The Empire's massive warships moved through space like an unstoppable storm, their guns locked and ready. They were about to crush Earth beneath their heel, just like they had done to countless worlds before. Yet that message kept coming. Run. It echoed in the silent space around them, almost like a warning. The commanders felt a flicker of doubt, but they quickly pushed it away. They were used to enemies that tried to scare them. They had dealt with threats before, and every time, they had destroyed them. Why are we even paying attention to this? One officer asked. We're the Empire. No one can stop us. Let's just end this quickly. They all agreed, and the fleet moved forward, their weapons ready to fire. But still, the message continued. Run. As the ships entered Earth's orbit, the commanders noticed something odd. Earth's surface was quiet, too quiet. There were no large defenses waiting to stop them. There were no signs of a large military presence, no fleets of warships lined up to face them. It seemed like the humans had done nothing to prepare. They really are afraid, one of the commanders muttered. They've given up. We'll wipe them out in minutes. But the humans had done something different. They hadn't panicked. They hadn't run away. Instead, they had prepared in their own way. They weren't afraid, and they weren't going to give up. They had simply waited for the right moment. The Empire's fleet began to move down into Earth's atmosphere, the first ships ready to deploy soldiers. The Empire's troops felt ready. They were prepared for a quick, easy victory. They imagined Earth's people would surrender without a fight, begging for mercy. But as the first drop pods began to fall toward the Earth's surface, they saw something they didn't expect. Small human fighters, ships that seemed old and outdated, began to rise into the air. They were nothing compared to the might of the Empire's fleet, but they were well organized, moving quickly and attacking with precision. The Empire's soldiers were surprised. They hadn't expected a fight from such small old ships. The humans had no chance against the Empire's superior technology. But as the battle began, the Empire quickly realized that the humans weren't going to back down. Their fighters were fast and unpredictable, dodging the Empire's massive warships, attacking from unexpected angles. It wasn't a fight the Empire had ever imagined. The humans weren't afraid. They weren't running. Instead, they were fighting with everything they had. One of the commanders started to feel uneasy. He had underestimated the humans. The Empire's fleet was huge and powerful, but now they were facing an enemy that refused to give up. He could see the shock on his soldiers' faces as they tried to fight back against the sudden, fierce resistance from the humans. The Empire had believed that Earth would be easy to conquer, but it was clear now that the humans were not like other civilizations. They weren't just going to bow down and surrender. The more the Empire fought, the more they began to realize they were facing something different. They were facing something dangerous. As the first wave of Empire soldiers landed on Earth, they were met with fierce resistance. The humans weren't just defending, they were attacking. Small groups of soldiers with weapons they had built themselves fought back against the Empire's soldiers with surprising skill. The Empire's advanced technology couldn't easily crush the humans' resourcefulness. And that message still rang in the Empire's ears. Run. It wasn't a warning to ignore. The humans were not afraid. The message wasn't a threat. It was the truth. And the Empire was starting to understand that. They were wrong. They had underestimated Earth. And now, it was too late. The Empire had underestimated Earth. They thought the humans would be easy to crush. The first wave of Empire soldiers landed on Earth's surface, and their commanders were sure it would be a quick victory. But they didn't realize that the humans had prepared for this moment. The Empire was about to learn the hard way that Earth was not a planet to be taken lightly. When the Empire's ships began to deploy their soldiers, they expected the humans to run in fear, to surrender without a fight. Instead, they were met with a different kind of resistance, unexpected, quick, and fierce. As the Empire's soldiers set foot on the ground, they found themselves facing small, human-made weapons that shouldn't have been able to stand up against their superior technology. But these weapons weren't normal. They were carefully designed by the humans, built for speed, precision, and strength. The Empire's soldiers, heavily armored and well-trained, found themselves in battle with a species they thought was weak. The humans fought back using guerrilla tactics, attacking in small groups, using the environment to their advantage. They hid in forests, behind buildings, and even underground, making it almost impossible for the Empire's forces to track them down. The Empire's soldiers tried to use their advanced technology to gain the upper hand. They fired lasers and launched missiles, but the humans were always one step ahead. Their weapons were simple but effective. They used clever traps, explosives, and even homemade firearms to damage the Empire's soldiers and equipment. The humans knew their land better than the Empire's soldiers could ever imagine, and they used that knowledge to create a battlefield that favored them. As the battle raged on, the Empire's commanders began to realize something they hadn't expected. The humans weren't running. They weren't hiding in fear. They were fighting back with everything they had, and they were doing it well. The Empire's soldiers began to lose ground. They had expected an easy victory, but instead, they found themselves struggling to control the situation. One of the commanders, watching from the safety of a command ship in orbit, frowned. How are they holding up so well? These humans should be crushed by now. What's going on? Another officer shook his head, disbelief on his face. I don't know, sir. They're everywhere, and their attacks are unpredictable. We can't pin them down. It's like they're everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The Empire's ships in orbit tried to support the ground forces, but it wasn't enough. The humans had a secret weapon, their spirit. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their homes, for their families, for their planet. The Empire's soldiers had never encountered such determination. They were used to easy victories, to worlds that crumbled before their might. But Earth wasn't like that. The humans had also prepared their air force. Small, fast fighter jets took to the sky, darting between the Empire's massive warships. The humans' jets weren't as advanced as the Empire's, but they were fast, agile, and full of surprises. They used hit-and-run tactics, attacking the Empire's ships from angles the larger, slower vessels couldn't defend against. The Empire's warships tried to retaliate, firing their powerful weapons, but the humans were too quick. Every time they fired, the humans were already gone, leaving only destruction in their wake. The Empire's commanders grew increasingly frustrated. They had underestimated the humans in every way. They thought it would be a simple invasion, but now they were faced with a war. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were winning small battles, one after another. The Empire's soldiers were getting tired. Their morale was slipping. They had expected to crush the humans, but instead, they were the ones on the defensive. In the middle of the chaos, a human commander stood on the front lines, watching as his troops fought with everything they had. He could see the Empire's soldiers beginning to falter. They were losing their confidence. The human commander raised his hand, signaling for a new offensive. The humans launched their next wave of attacks. They hit the Empire's forces harder, faster, and more strategically. The Empire's soldiers, exhausted from the constant fighting, couldn't keep up. Some of them began to retreat, unsure of how to continue the fight. The humans, sensing the weakness, pressed forward. The battle was far from over, but the first signs of victory were beginning to show. The humans were no longer just defending. They were fighting back, pushing the Empire's soldiers back. The Empire's commanders, watching from above, could see their forces beginning to lose control. They were stunned. This wasn't the Earth they had expected. This wasn't a planet that would bend to their will. The humans were different. As the first day of the battle ended, the Empire's soldiers were forced to pull back. They had not won the victory they had imagined. They had been defeated on the ground by a species they thought was weak. And above all, they had learned a harsh truth. The humans weren't afraid. They weren't going to run. They were going to fight. And they were going to win. The Empire had never faced anything like this before. They were used to quick, easy victories. Every time they invaded a new world, it was the same story. The inhabitants would surrender, beg for mercy, or simply give up without a fight. But Earth was different. The humans were not afraid. They were not running. They were fighting back. And now, the Empire was starting to realize just how wrong they had been. After the first day of battle, the Empire's soldiers were already feeling the pressure. Their forces had been pushed back, and they had lost ground they expected to easily take. The humans weren't just defending their planet. They were fighting with everything they had, and they were winning. Slowly, the Empire's confidence began to crack. The Empire's fleet, which had once seemed so powerful and unstoppable, was now facing problems they hadn't planned for. The Empire's warships, massive and heavily armed, had begun to take damage. The human jets and fighters, although smaller and less advanced, were incredibly fast and hard to catch. They struck with precision and then disappeared into the sky, leaving the Empire's ships with damaged weapons and shattered shields. The humans had learned how to fight back, how to use their planet's resources to their advantage. One of the Empire's commanders, General Vokar, was watching the battle unfold from the safety of his flagship. His eyes were wide with disbelief. "This can't be happening," he muttered to himself. "The humans should be cowering in fear. Why are they still fighting? Why aren't they giving up?" He had never seen anything like this before. He had fought countless wars, conquered countless worlds, but Earth had proven to be different. The humans weren't like the weak species the Empire had encountered before. They were fighting with everything they had, and they weren't going to stop. The human fighters were everywhere. They attacked in groups, launching hit-and-run missions that kept the Empire's forces constantly on edge. Their tactics were unpredictable, and no matter how hard the Empire tried to catch them, the humans always found a way to slip away. Every time the Empire thought they had the upper hand, the humans would strike again, harder and faster. General Vokar paced nervously on the bridge of his ship. He had called for reinforcements, but the more he looked at the battlefield, the more he realized that reinforcements might not be enough. The humans weren't just a nuisance. They were a threat, and he had underestimated them. "Send a message to the High Command," he ordered. "Tell them we need more troops. We need more ships. Earth is not like the other planets we've conquered. These humans are different." As the message was sent to the Empire's Central Command, Vokar turned to his officers. "We need to regroup and rethink our strategy. We're losing too many ships, too many soldiers. The humans have caught us off guard." His officers nodded, but they too could see that the Empire's grip on Earth was slipping. They had expected an easy invasion, but now they were stuck in a battle they weren't prepared for, and the more they fought, the more they realized they had no idea what the humans were capable of. Meanwhile, on the ground, the humans were not giving up. They were everywhere, moving quickly through the cities, forests, and mountains. The Empire's soldiers were beginning to feel trapped. Every time they moved, the humans attacked. Every time they tried to find a way to retreat, they found themselves in another fight. One human commander, a young woman named Captain Lena, stood in front of her troops, giving orders with calm determination. "We've got them on the run. Keep up the pressure. They're not used to this kind of fight. Let's show them what we can do." Her troops, a mix of soldiers, engineers, and civilians who had taken up arms, cheered in response. They knew this wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about winning their home, their future. The Empire had come to Earth thinking it was an easy target, but now the humans were showing them just how wrong they were. The Empire's soldiers, once confident in their strength, were now starting to feel the effects of the humans' resistance. They were running low on supplies. Their morale was breaking. The Empire's superior technology wasn't helping them anymore. The humans had fought through wars, endured hardship, and now they were using that experience to fight back with everything they had. Back in orbit, General Volker looked at the battlefield and clenched his fists. The situation was getting worse by the hour. The Empire's soldiers had not expected this kind of fight. They had expected Earth to fall in days, not weeks. The humans were making it clear that they would never surrender, that they would never give up. "They're not like any species we faced," Volker said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "They don't fear us. They fight for something greater." It was a truth the Empire had never known before. The humans weren't just defending their planet. They were defending their way of life, their families, their homes, and the Empire was realizing, too late, that it had made a grave mistake. The Empire's fleet, once full of pride and arrogance, was now in retreat. The humans had proven that no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how advanced their technology, the spirit of a people fighting for their survival could never be underestimated. The Empire was starting to learn the hardest lesson of all: never underestimate the will of humans to fight back. The fear that began to spread among the Empire's soldiers was something they had never felt before. They were the most powerful army in the galaxy, and for the first time, they were up against an enemy that wasn't afraid of them. They had been trained to believe that their technology, their weapons, and their strength made them unstoppable. But the humans had shown them a different reality. It all started with small things: whispers in the barracks, nervous glances between soldiers. As the battle raged on, the Empire's forces were starting to lose more than just ground. They were losing their confidence. They were losing their will to fight. The humans weren't backing down, and the soldiers didn't know how to handle it. The Empire's soldiers had never been in a situation like this. In every battle they fought, they were always the victors. The enemy always crumbled before their might. But the humans had no intention of crumbling. They fought back with such fury and determination that it shook the soldiers to their core. It was as if the humans didn't know how to be afraid. And that was terrifying. Sergeant Solar, a battle-hardened officer who had led countless invasions across the galaxy, stood at the front of his unit, staring out into the dense forest where the humans were hiding. His men were tense, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The last time they had attacked, the humans had ambushed them. Now, Zillar couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched again. "Keep your eyes open," Zillar growled, his voice low and filled with unease. "The humans are close. I can feel it." His soldiers, once proud and confident, shifted uncomfortably. They were used to being the ones doing the hunting, not the hunted. But every time they moved, every time they tried to advance, it felt like the humans were always one step ahead. The soldiers had been caught in traps, ambushed in the night, and forced to retreat. They had never imagined they would be the ones on the defensive. The fear started to grow. It wasn't just the enemy that terrified them. It was the unknown. The humans didn't follow any rules. They didn't act like normal enemies. There were no clear patterns, no easy way to predict what they would do next. They used their environment, their terrain, and their weapons in ways the Empire had never expected. It made the soldiers feel like they were fighting ghosts, an enemy they could never quite see, never quite catch. In the Empire's command ship, General Volker was beginning to show signs of frustration. His soldiers were reporting more casualties. The reinforcements he had called for were slow to arrive. The once confident officers now spoke in worried tones, unsure of how to proceed. The battle wasn't going as planned, and the fear was starting to spread to the top. Why are they so stubborn? Volker muttered to himself. Why aren't they retreating? Why aren't they giving up? He had underestimated the humans. He had expected them to be like all the other species he had conquered, weak, easy to break. But these humans were different. They fought like they had nothing to lose, like they had a purpose that was far greater than just winning a battle. They were willing to die for their planet, and that scared the Empire. Back on the ground, the Empire's soldiers were beginning to show cracks in their armor, both literal and emotional. A private named Kell, who had seen many battles, couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of the humans, men, women, and children, fighting back with a ferocity he had never seen before. He sat up in his tent one night, staring into the darkness, the sounds of distant gunfire echoing in his ears. How are they doing this? He whispered to himself. Why won't they give up? The fear was growing. It wasn't just about losing the battle. It was about losing to an enemy that wasn't supposed to be a threat. The Empire's soldiers had never known fear like this. It was a fear that came from realizing that they weren't as invincible as they had believed. The humans weren't just defending their world. They were fighting to survive, to protect everything they loved. And that kind of fight was terrifying. As the days wore on, the Empire's soldiers began to retreat further and further. They no longer had the confidence they once had. They were tired, scared, and starting to question their mission. They had thought the humans would be easy to crush, but now they weren't sure how they were going to win this war. General Volker was forced to call for a temporary retreat, hoping that a break would give his soldiers time to regroup and rebuild their strength. He had to admit, though, that the longer they stayed on Earth, the more the humans began to break their spirits. What are we up against? He said aloud, almost to himself. These humans, they don't fear us. They never feared us. He had been wrong. He had thought the humans would bend to the Empire's will. But instead, the humans were showing the Empire something it had never seen before, true strength. And that strength was enough to make even the bravest soldiers doubt their mission. The Empire's soldiers had never known fear before, but now, as they looked into the eyes of their human enemies, they realized they had been wrong all along. The humans were not just a species to be conquered. They were a species that would never back down. And that, more than anything, was terrifying. The Empire had thought they could control Earth. They had thought they could crush the humans in a matter of days. But now, things were different. The humans, once pushed back and underestimated, were no longer just defending their planet. They were taking the lead, and the Empire wasn't prepared for it. It began with small victories. Human soldiers, using the knowledge of their land, began to reclaim the cities they had lost. The Empire's warships, once the mighty force that ruled the sky, were now under constant attack. Human fighters, faster and more agile, swooped in and out of the Empire's defenses, firing from angles the Empire couldn't predict. The once feared Empire fleet had now become the hunted. General Volker sat in his command center, his face tense with frustration. He had expected reinforcements, but they were still on their way. His troops were spread thin, and now he was starting to see reports of humans taking back ground they had once controlled. How did this happen? He asked, more to himself than to anyone in particular. Why are we losing? His officers had no answer. They were all in shock. The humans were everywhere, and they were pushing back harder than ever. It wasn't just the soldiers on the front lines. They were seeing the civilian population rise up too. People who had once cowered in fear now picked up arms. They fought alongside their soldiers, defending their homes, their families, their very way of life. And that made them stronger than anything the Empire had faced before. One of the most surprising things was the way the humans had adapted. They didn't have the advanced technology the Empire's forces did, but they had something more: resourcefulness. They used everything around them. Abandoned factories became makeshift weapon factories. Streets became battlefields where the Empire's advanced tanks were vulnerable to well-placed traps. Humans used the cities they knew so well to their advantage. The Empire had never seen anything like it. In one key battle, the humans managed to strike at an Empire supply convoy, cutting off their resources and leaving them stranded. The convoy had been carrying essential equipment, including extra ammunition and fuel for the Empire's warships. Without it, the Empire's forces began to struggle. The humans, using their knowledge of the terrain, launched a series of lightning-fast attacks that caught the Empire's soldiers off guard. What had been a simple supply run turned into a disaster for the Empire. Lieutenant Reyna, a human officer, watched the convoy go up in flames from a nearby hill. She had led the strike herself, along with a group of highly trained soldiers. As the smoke rose into the sky, she allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. They had done it. The Empire's supplies were cut off. They had turned the tide in this area. "Great job, everyone," Reyna said, turning to her team. "Now, let's move. We've got more to do." She knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The humans had been pushed to their limits, but now they were fighting back with everything they had. Reyna's eyes were sharp with determination. "We're not going to stop until they leave." And she wasn't alone in her resolve. Across Earth, people were waking up to the reality that they had the power to fight back. People who had never picked up a weapon before were now standing side by side with experienced soldiers. Farmers, engineers, teachers, everyone had a role to play. The Empire had made a grave mistake by underestimating humanity. The humans weren't going to let their world fall without a fight. Back in the Empire's command center, Volker was receiving bad news from every direction. "What's happening on the ground?" he demanded. "Sir, the humans. They've begun a full counterattack," an officer replied, his voice shaking. "They've retaken several key cities, and our troops are being pushed back. We've lost control of the south. They've destroyed our supply lines." Volker slammed his fist on the table. "This can't be happening. The humans should have been crushed by now." But they hadn't been crushed. They were fighting back with everything they had. And now, the Empire was on the defensive. The humans weren't just playing a waiting game anymore. They were actively taking control of the situation. Across the planet, the humans were rallying. Even in the hardest-hit areas, there was hope. People were no longer just trying to survive. They were fighting to win. The Empire's forces were starting to retreat, regrouping to try and hold onto the territory they still controlled. They were now fighting for survival, just as much as the humans had been. The mighty Empire, which had once crushed worlds without a second thought, was now facing an enemy that refused to bow down. General Volker stared at the battle map in front of him, his mind racing. "We've underestimated them," he muttered. "These humans are more than we thought. And now, they've taken the lead." For the first time since the Empire's invasion of Earth had begun, Volker realized something he hadn't before. The humans weren't fighting just for their planet. They were fighting for their very survival. They had a strength the Empire couldn't break. And that was something the Empire would have to reckon with, whether they were ready or not. The battle had raged on for weeks, but now, as the dust settled and the sun rose over the war-torn landscape, it became clear the Empire's invasion of Earth had failed. The humans had fought back with a strength the Empire never expected. And now, the tide had turned in their favor. The Empire's once mighty fleet was in retreat, and their soldiers were scattered, demoralized, and lost. General Volker stood at the command center, staring at the holographic map in front of him. The lines that once marked their control were now disappearing, replaced by the human flags rising over their cities. His face was hard, but his eyes showed the defeat that was settling in. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. "What are we going to do?" one of his officers asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've lost everything. The fleet's retreating, and we can't hold the ground any longer." Volker turned away from the map and looked out the window, where the skies were filled with the human ships. The Empire's once proud warships, now battered and beaten, were drifting in space. The humans had not only defeated their forces on Earth, they had shown that they could fight in space as well. There was nowhere left to run. "They should have run," Volker muttered under his breath, his voice cold. "They should have listened to our warning." But the humans hadn't run. They hadn't backed down, and now they were going to make sure the Empire never forgot their mistake. Back on Earth, the humans were preparing for the final push. It wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about sending a message. The humans had fought for their planet, their homes, and their families. Now, they were going to ensure that the Empire knew exactly who had won this war. Sergeant Reina, who had led so many of the human counterattacks, stood with her team, looking at the massive screen in front of her. It showed the final countdown, the last moments of the Empire's fleet. The humans had deployed their secret weapon, a massive satellite that had been hidden on Earth for years. This weapon, a combination of advanced technology and human ingenuity, would send a signal to the Empire's remaining forces, one that would be heard across the galaxy. Rana took a deep breath, knowing that once the message was sent, there would be no going back. This would be the end of the Empire's dreams of conquering Earth. It was time to send the message. "You should have run." As the countdown began, Rina looked around at her team. They had fought together, built together, and now they were about to finish what they had started. They had defeated the Empire not just with weapons, but with willpower. The Empire had underestimated them, and that would be their downfall. "Ready, Sergeant," a soldier said, his finger hovering over the button. "On your mark." Rana nodded. "Do it." The soldier pressed the button, and a powerful signal burst from the satellite, sending waves of energy across space. The message was simple, but it would resonate in the hearts of the Empire's soldiers for the rest of their lives. "You should have run." The signal was sent. Across the galaxy, the Empire's forces were listening. They had expected to hear the sounds of victory. Instead, they heard the voice of their defeat. The message came through loud and clear, carried on waves of energy that traveled faster than light. It was a warning, a statement, and a promise all in one. Back on the Empire's command ship, General Volker stared at his communication screen, his face pale. He had seen the message, and he knew it meant the end. The Empire had lost. The humans had proven that they were not just survivors. They were warriors, and they had taken back their world. Volker's mind raced as he tried to come up with a plan, but there was nothing left to do. The Empire was broken, their fleet in disarray. They had lost Earth, and they would never be able to recover from this defeat. The humans had made sure of that. The message echoed in his mind as he turned to his officers. "We have failed," he said, his voice hollow. "They should have run. We should have run." In the human-controlled cities, celebrations erupted. They had done it. Earth was theirs. The Empire had come, but they had not reckoned with the strength of humanity. The people of Earth were victorious, and the message was clear. They would never again be slaves to anyone, especially not the Empire. Rina stood at the front of a crowd, watching the fireworks light up the sky. She had seen the worst of the war, and now she was witnessing the best. The humans had fought back, and now they had their world back. "They should have run," Rina whispered to herself, smiling as the last remnants of the Empire's forces flowed into space. But they didn't, and that was their mistake. The Empire had learned the hard way that humans would never give up. No matter how strong the enemy, no matter how overwhelming the odds, the people of Earth would always fight back. And in the end, they would always win.